Uh, all right. I
Good
guess we
morning.
can, want to get started.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys all for being here this morning. On a short Thanksgiving week. Hope everybody has some good plans to be with loved ones later this week. For the first half, the technical discussion this morning, the plan is to chat about, just have an open discussion about um, the topic that was discussed last week with the urban stream restoration. I believe it was Mike Galvin from Johnson, Miriam, and Thompson came and spoke with us. I well, unfortunately wasn't able to make that meeting, so I didn't know if anyone on this call was able to attend. They can kind of give us just a quick elevator speech as to what what was discussed, and that way we can kind of open up just a discussion about you know urban stream restoration in general.
I guess I'll give a talk since nobody else spoke up yet.
Thanks, Dave.
So what Mike was really emphasizing is kind of the issues of project management associated with urban stream restoration. So it wasn't really related to the technical aspects of how do we do a design for stream restoration in urban setting. It was how do we get a project managed to be efficient for urban settings. So one of the things he emphasized on is the idea and awareness of trees. We spoke a little bit about some laws that are currently being voted on in Maryland that's to limit ideas of stream restoration because of the amount of disturbance to trees. We talked a fair amount about communication with stakeholders and groups to be able to keep an urban stream restoration project moving forward. I think one of the focuses that we had was that we're going to see kind of standard, what some people are calling form-based or other people call natural channel design. We're going to see that happening a lot more in urban settings because of the risk associated with infrastructure failure. So we have to be communicating well, and we have to find ways to be able to get more people educated about stream restoration so that they can see a restoration project get done, see some trees that have to be taken out in the short term, and not kind of shut down the whole project just because they don't want to see trees down in the short term. So that was the one thing that's some of the stuff that was discussed last week. If anybody else has anything else they want to add, they can. We also the week before talked about fishing links, the recreational golf program, and we kind of ran out of time last week for many questions or discussion on fishing links. So we're kind of available this week if anybody wants to talk about anything related to fishing links or questions or urban stream restoration. Then we'll continue the discussion with that. So did anybody have any thoughts about the project management of related to urban stream restoration projects that you want to share, or any questions or thoughts related to the fishing links concept that you want to share?
Well, for me, regarding urban stream restoration, I think one of the things, in my opinion, from a management perspective, management of those projects is key, is finding that fine line between achieving your client's goals and managing that ecosystem, providing uplift to the maximum extent practical. Like there's a project that our team was working on right now where we're supporting a utility authority, and that all we're working on is these aerial sewer crossings that are falling apart because of the adjacent stream erosion that is occurring. And so their main priority is the utility, but our priority, our main goal is the stream. And so making sure that we're achieving that goal of protecting the integrity of that utility, of that crossing, but doing it in a way that is reasonable for our client, because obviously they've had clients in the past. When we had our kickoff meeting, they had clients in the past that kind of say, well, you know, we're going to do what's best for the stream and not necessarily what's best for the utility. And I think that could be a tough line to find, because, you know, your client is ultimately the one that's paying for this project. And so I think you have to be cognizant of that and respectful, and say, you know, we're not gonna prepare a design that, you know, is, I guess, in excess of what is needed to achieve the goals of the project. And so that's one thing I've noticed lately that's just kind of been at the forefront of my mind in regards to more urban stream restoration, dealing with site constraints, infrastructure development, etc. I see Dave Woody on the call. I don't know. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Dave, but you're kind of if anybody has experience with urban stream restoration, it would be you, working for Mecklenburg County. That's all right.
Actually, if I may say something, I work in the Baltimore area, and I actually work with the school system. And one of the things that we've been dealing with, and we actually are creating some instructional lessons and actually a full unit around this, is just educating the community where stream restoration is occurring, because in talking with community stakeholders, one of the things that's come up is in many cases these projects are being seen as something that's being done to them and not something that's being done for them. So just considering how communities are engaged, you know, it's beyond, it's not just the client construction, but also the community in which these things sit, and some of the historical issues that may exist around those projects that have to be considered. I was involved in a project years ago, and I was still teaching. And in that capacity, they were putting in a stormwater management pond in adjacent to the school, which we were tickled about because it was going to become a great study opportunity. However, the people around it weren't real tickled because they were afraid it was going to be a mosquito haven. Yeah. And the engineer having to explain what it was and everything. I mean, it was a not on my backyard kind of problem, but still that level of community engagement is really important, just so that people aren't pushing back against you or creating issues while you're working on construction.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stems from just like uncertainty and, like you said, like lack of knowledge. Like people just don't understand. They haven't seen it for themselves. They don't fully grasp what the project entails, what the end result's going to look like. Right. And so, stakeholder engagement and public education is huge in that matter. In terms of just getting people on board, because if people aren't on board, especially when you're spending public dollars, that makes things a lot harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Damn it.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, can you hear me
now? Yes, sir. How are you doing?
Oh, struggling this morning.
Don't worry about it. It's Monday morning. We'll give you a pass.
I'll just second that I'm currently digging dirt right now in a project in North Mecklenburg County in Davidson. And I'm not kidding you. It's taken me over 10 years to get to this point. Wow. Maybe because of tree loss. And, with stream restoration, it's change. People are very resistant to anything that's going to change their visual aspect. And you really have to not only, I hate to use the word sell the project, but educate the public on what you're trying to achieve and the long-term vision that comes with that, and trying to correct the hydrology that has occurred and got the channel into the situation that it's in. And that's basically what we're doing out here. This is what I would consider a Grand Canyon. It's 14-foot banks, vertical banks, both sides. Wow. And the trees that are there are just barely at the top because this was historically farmed. And there's only a small windrow of trees at the top. And obviously they're falling in right now. Right. And when we come in to do our cross section, we're going to be taking all those out. So that is you talk about ripping the Band-Aid off. That's what's kind of occurring up there. But the public, I think, when they see the improvements that we're making, because now we're into the project, we have the cross section established, and we're kind of working our way downstream. It looks so much better, and these streams heal themselves so quickly. It's amazing at the vegetation, once the canopy kind of lets the sunlight in and you get the new native vegetation established again, it just explodes off the ground.
Yeah,
And
in those areas that native or that old seed bed, that can be stored in that soil for long periods of time. Yeah, like you said, as soon as you let sunlight in, it just pops.
Absolutely. I'll add one more thing and turn it back over to you. On the educational piece of it, one thing that we have found is very impactful to the public is getting a first person view. And we have been doing a combination of 360 cameras and drone footage down in the channel. So you can, as if you're walking in the creek and you're looking up at all the exposed root bed, all the dirt banks, everything that you cannot see from the top of the bank because it all looks green. And from a distance, you see the trees and everything. You think, oh, the stream's just fine. Well, because it's so incised, when it does get a substantial rain, it never gets out of the channels because it's eating them up. But when you get down in the channel and you look at it from a different perspective, people, they have this jaw dropping, oh my gosh, what's going on here? So that's helped us quite a bit too, is just getting a different perspective of the channel and visualizing it in a different way.
Thanks, Dave. And how do you normally share that information? Like through social media, or, I mean, how does that get disseminated out to the public?
Well, we have put together some YouTube videos on that.
Okay.
We've created some links with QR code with some of our consultants and create, a point to point, just like in Google Maps, where you stream itself will set up a QR code, put it along the channel for the local residents to kind of click on, and they can, from their computer screen or into the stream rather, and then they can visually look around with the 360 camera and look at the banks, look behind them, look forward. And it's very powerful.
Yeah, I imagine that's pretty much standard practice for you guys at Mecklenburg County, because you don't really have projects that are rural.
That's right. We've done some major renovations, I might say, especially along Little Sugar Creek. Of course, we have partnerships everywhere we can, but now with a lot of the past projects, we are out of what I consider the low hanging fruit. That's working on county property, and now we're really heavily getting into private property and partnerships. And we've always done that, but nowadays, the last big project I did, I had 60 private easements that we had to acquire. And, another one of our project managers, Stephanie Roberts, she just did Stewart Creek, and that was a whole slew of private easements as well. So it's
Wow. Well, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate your input.
Oh, you're so welcome, and happy to share everything too. I'll try to post a link up. We just reestablished the 360 tour.
Yeah, I'd love to see that actually.
Yeah, I'll try to find that and forward that to you guys.
Thank you. Anybody else have any success stories in terms of engaging with, stakeholders, public or private, but just, in terms of maybe when in potentially, urban area where there's a little more, contentious resistance to a project? Trying to think. I had a project years ago down in the city for the city of Wilmington, North Carolina, and it was basically a small stream channel that kind of meandered through a fairly dense residential neighborhood, and this was a largely flood mitigation project. There was a lot of nuisance flooding that was occurring on a fairly regular basis, and we worked with the city of Wilmington. We had a lot of public meetings that were included with the scope of the project, and I remember I was fairly young in my profession at the time. I'd only been working out of college for a year or two, so I mostly experienced it just from a participation perspective. But I remember those first couple of public meetings where there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of just hand wringing of like, well, I'm not sure, I don't really understand. This is going to be in my backyard, as Eric mentioned, and there was a lot of that sentiment of like, well, I just would rather you just not do anything at all. But as the project progressed, as we were able to have some more good, visual renderings of what was being proposed, and there's more knowledge, more of the general public as the public meetings went on, as the design progressed, people became a lot more interested and supportive of the project, and that it was constructed, gosh, back in 2012, maybe 2011, and I think it's been a huge uplift, not only for the ecosystem, that coastal riparian ecosystem, but also for that community, really helping to prevent some of that nuisance flooding that they were dealing with on a regular basis. I see some folks jumping on. We're kind of just generally having a conversation about urban stream restoration. I talked a little about preservation of riparian vegetation in urban settings, and how that can be challenging, especially with the public, and then also about stakeholder engagement. Success stories, things that have worked well. Anyone have any other comments?
I always have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh. What's up?
I'm sorry I missed the early part of this call.
No, you're good.
Here's something that dwells in a space in my brain regarding urban environments and stream restoration. Probably the single largest controller of land that's considered streams and riparian in an urban landscape is utilities.
Absolutely.
And one, for instance, power lines, they straighten the stuff, and then they go through and bush hog it, they spray everything in there. I wonder if there's a way that we could get them to adhere to a more sensitive, I don't say we have to necessarily restore their stream, but at least just start to get some decent plants in there. And if they're going to put some plants in there, maybe they can get some stabilization and realize some asset management. But the way they manage these corridors is totally inconsistent with Clean Water Act. And we've seen this with utilities before. Yes. The Corps of Engineers just doesn't hold them against the fire like even new linear projects.
Yes.
I'm just curious if anybody's had any experience with working with the utilities, let's say an energy company, to develop a palette that's palatable.
Actually, yes. I appreciate you bringing that up, Josh. I actually worked on 2 projects with Duke Energy was involved. One was in Charlotte. The other one was in Greenville, North Carolina, where you're right. The stream was right in their right of way. And you're right. When you're inside that right of way, there really is no other entity that you have that is more powerful than the energy company. They have essentially full right to that land without very little oversight. So the one in Charlotte, actually, I was able to work with Duke Energy staff they have there's a lot of information, at least with Duke Energy. Maybe other utility companies are similar, but where they have certain requirements, basically, where they say, when they're managing especially vegetation within their rights of way, once the trees get over a certain height, they basically that's when the tree goes. And it's not like they tree top them, they just cut the whole tree down. And so the project that I worked on was it was Pearl Street Park, and it was in a part called Metropolitan Charlotte. We developed a planting palette that was basically like low growing shrubs and herbaceous, like dense herbaceous grasses that all had a mature height that was below what that threshold was. I can't remember what it was, maybe 15 or 20 feet, and had to go back and forth for several months to get that approved. But because initially what they wanted us to do was just to line the whole thing with riprap and walk away. But we were able to successfully talk with them. But they also did have the caveat of like, hey, like you can play. We're going to allow you to play this stuff here, but if anything gets over that 20 foot, we're going to cut it down and we're not going to ask for permission. So there was a kind of an agreement, and I was able to use that same pallet for that project in Greenville. That was a little different because the stream was actually the erosion from the stream was actually threatening one of their transmission towers, so they were a little more motivated to stabilize
And
that.
what was the driver for that project? Was it a water quality project, or it wasn't a mitigation project?
The one in Charlotte?
Yeah.
That was actually, it was a part of a park renovation, and there's a
Okay.
tributary to Little Sugar Creek that came right down through the park. And so it was more just aesthetic. The channel itself was fairly stable. There was a very little incision. It was it was incised, but it was not that bad.
Right.
And so all we did was just added some, a nice little riparian corridor, and then added some structure in the channel to give it some bed form. Not a whole lot, but yeah, it was more of an aesthetic thing of just, trying to bring that channel into the overall aesthetics of the park plan instead of avoiding it.
So yeah, I think that's a great for instance, it'd be nice because number one, they didn't lose any authority over their
Exactly.
easement. And that's important. And I don't think they need to lose authority over their easement. I think the O&M and just their maintenance practices along these corridors is really important. And if you put yourself in their place, these large utilities, I mean, they're not in the business of picking up crumbs and dealing with small messes. They like these wholesale policies, these blanket policies, and you can just send trucks out to go do the job and come back. And changing that culture, I think that's inspiring to hear that you were able to come to terms with them with an idea that's different, and maybe you guys can keep an eye on that, and as it's successful or not successful, you can I don't know what entities you were working with at the power companies, but if we can continue to elevate that practice and improve that practice in a way, and because this is what we've learned with oil and gas and other utilities, is if you demonstrate your common interest for them and their services, they have an important job, whether it's water and sewer, the stream's important, but what's more important is all the people who are drinking water and using the toilet.
Absolutely.
So if we're putting ourselves there and embracing what's important to them like that in these urban environments and these different interests, then I think,
and if you can present a plan to them that is mutually beneficial, right? That it's gonna meet their goals and objectives and be in theory less maintenance intensive over time. But it's also going to be beneficial to that riparian, that stream environment.
And demonstrating benefits for them. Okay, here's a planting plan. Like the threat of the system around a corridor like that to develop into a more mature cereal phase of life. Yeah, that's a threat to the power line or the utility, right? But if they can realize that, hey, maybe just going in and cutting these 8-inch diameter trees when they get that big and just taking those down, leaving them, dropping them in place, leave them in the floodplain. And they're like, well, hey, that's a lot easier than having to get all these chemicals out there and put all this poison in our river and constantly bush hog out there. If maybe that maintenance, you can say, okay, here's the maintenance for this linear footage of corridor. And how much is your maintenance, How much do you have to pay a crew of people and chainsaws and and cherry picker trucks to go out there? So, because I feel like that's a huge element, in the urban environment, is just all these intersecting interests.
And to your point, like you potentially even helping them to determine or come up with a maintenance plan that we don't necessarily have to specify a planting palette. We just say, the way that you manage vegetation within the vicinity of these stream environments, do it a little differently than you do in the upland areas. Like you said, just cut the tree and drop it. Don't drag it away. Don't spray it. And then you've got all this nice woody debris habitat that you're creating as part of that. And as that canopy establishes, you'll have the growth should in theory slow down over time. So maintenance becomes less.
Yeah, but the crazy thing, I mean, the mindset there is their maintenance is like, okay, this crew that day, and this is the equipment and trucks and number of people they need.
Yeah.
But if your plan is different, then they're like, somebody has to think. Someone's got to stop and think about it. And they're really busy thinking about just because they're widgeting. It's a commodity they're serving. So
that's another good point, is that their maintenance is usually contracted out, and these people that don't necessarily aren't thinking. You're right.
that's not how we usually do it.
Right. They're just going through and just cutting. Yeah, that's a good point. No, but it is a problem. I see it a lot, as I'm sure you do as well. It's something that if we could figure out a solution, could create a lot of good. For these.
Here's what I think would really be inspiration. Everyone has these ESG goals, and among them is your environmental. It's not ESG, environmental sustainability. It's environmental social government, but the environmental sustainability piece of it, it's and we're seeing that a lot of companies have come out and claimed this, this desire to go net neutral, carbon net zero, or reduce their carbon footprint. Well, if we can have our utilities, and so that what that did when people announced this, it inflated stock values. So they were like, hey, look, free stock value, all we have to do is say this is important. And then a couple of years later, they're asked to deliver. And the company I work for, when they do their quarterly reports to the stock shareholders, they talk about financials, and then they also talk about these ESGs. And so that brings some, right now it's a really loose framework, but the idea brings some meaningfulness to it. So if we found a utility that was like, hey, what can we do other than change the light bulbs to reduce our carbon footprint? We say, well, if you manage a more sustainable natural environment, like, I don't know, is there a difference between the carbon sequestration of a volunteer pioneer field of weeds along a straight line ditch versus a more natural system? That I just feel like that could be an inspiration. I mean, if they could get mitigation, or if they could get a revenue, or mitigation just sounds like too much of a headache for them, really, with all the
it'd be something as simple as just like a volunteer, like self-crediting thing, like like basically, like, look what we're doing, like, look, here's evidence to show what we're doing, like, pat ourselves on the back, like you're saying. That could, especially when you're talking about from an ESG perspective, and that stuff that's more non-regulatory. That's a possibility.
Well, maybe you can maybe you can research that, since you've penetrated some of their, maybe you didn't get far enough along, but maybe you met somebody who knows somebody there that's more interested in those types of projects.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I appreciate that, Josh. Great name, by the way, too.
Well, that's what's going to change. That's what's going to change stewardship. That's what's going to make changes. I mean, right now, a lot of stream restoration is this circle of mystics and eccentrics, and everybody else outside of that is like, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know. And
just
so
being more responsible. Being better stewards.
Making it simpler and palatable, and bringing it into these other sectors as part of, you didn't used to worry about stormwater, but now you do. You didn't used to worry about safety, but now you do. You didn't used to worry about the public, but now you do. And getting this, you didn't used to worry about stewardship, but now you do. Getting those large industries, whether it's utilities, and I think utilities are a good one, because that crosses boundaries and watersheds and political boundaries. I think that's really where we're gonna hope for progress, is to inspire them. It's not going to be legislated. It's not going to be mandated. It's not going to be incentivized that good, because incentives require a lot of change.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you for the discussion. This was really good. I thought it was I thought it was good. So I appreciate it. Now I think I'm gonna hand the floor over to Dave, and we're gonna talk a little bit about some the inspirational portion of this talk. Floor is yours, Dave.
All right. Yeah, you bet. Does anybody else have anything else they want to discuss